especially during this budget season, it's kind of hard to recognize when one meeting starts and one begins. Yeah, I think we're getting close. Hopefully next Thursday we'll got a couple more of the larger pullouts of the budget to discuss. Just a reminder to council and actually the community and obviously everybody, we've got the budget online for a while now. If folks have things that they feel like are in there that they'd like addressed either at the next council meeting and on Thursday on the budget, it looks like we're going to kind of peg towards a May meeting for the actual approval. So we'll hopefully finalize most of the budgetary stuff. Nate Burkhart and Nate Moore and Ashley and I will try to update every little thing in there. I think this year I'm going to really try to dial in like the narratives and the council recommendations too as best I can see in there, and then we'll go from there. And that's pretty much all I have. Ashley or Nate?
I don't have anything, Nate.
Did you print, Ashley, the financials, the year to date or no?
No, did you send those to me?
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, I can share it on my screen, but obviously, this is the second Friday of the month, so it's a big Finance Friday. We're all excited. I can tell. Calm down, everybody.
I feel like every day is Big Finance Friday right now.
True.
But, obviously, if you don't have it in front of you, which doesn't sound like you do, but we do have the budget versus actual. This is through March 31st. This is obviously all posted on ellsworthmaine.gov as well on the city's website. But you can see the year-to-date financials. I tried to remember everything you guys talked about last month and ways to show. So if you look at the top two lines, the taxes receivable, you can see last year's and what percentage that was. So last year was 86.61%. Right now we're currently at 87.6% of the taxes receivable. Then we have personal property taxes. Last year 90.11% through the end of March. Currently at 83.98%. So obviously we don't have to talk about everything on here, but just to give you an idea, like I said, this is on the city website. Like I said, do our best to show transparency, and obviously any questions that anyone has, you're welcome to call, email us, and we will be sure to answer. But as far as, I wanted to give you a quick audit update really quick. Ashley and I met with the RHR team, a couple of them. I believe it was on Tuesday or Wednesday this week. Just so you know, we obviously discussed audit and when. I specifically asked them, when, because we were told the end of April. I looked at the two ladies, and Ashley can admit, I looked at them and I said, is it realistic that we can have this audit done by the end of April? They said, obviously, with our cooperation and their work, their goal is to get it done by the end of April. Now, like I said, I know we've been, smoking mirrors in the past, but our goal is to get it done by the end of April. And obviously, if we push the budget to the month of May, hopefully that gives us time that the audit is complete before the budget is passed. So I just want to give you that little update on the audit. Like I said, Ashley and I are going to be working just as hard as we worked on the budget. We're going to be working hard to get the audit, the reports that they need to get this audit complete. So that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, and just a quick note on that too from our own team, just a big thank you. I think what the things we were asked to provide were provided in December, was it, Nate? Early December?
It was actually, yeah, it was close to November, but yeah.
Yeah, so like almost, so we were given a large list of things, we sent those over, and it seemed to be that was, we had completed the needs. We did a ton of work to get these into the software system and to get up to date on these things. So it was a bit of a surprise when we got a little later in the game last month an additional request for information. Not completely out of the field, obviously, for the auditors. They want to know more information, but this was of a level of this was the type of thing we should have done it much earlier. So we're working on that. I don't want to have this happen again, and I apologize. I probably should have been pushing To double, triple confirm, this is our 4th year of our contracted timeline with the auditor, so there's 1 year remaining after this, and then we'll be going out to audit. And I don't know, I'll be thinking about that contract, the vendors, how we build in mechanisms for what's required from the city, for what timeline, and what timelines are required by the auditing firms we work with in order to respond to data, to ensure that there's not kind of a dependency that we don't have as much control over when it comes to timelines. I sincerely apologize and have to do a little better on this next year. So the other piece.
Can you email those financials to the council, please?
I emailed to you guys yesterday.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's all right.
Great.
No, it was with the payroll and everything else. It was attached. to that, so
Okay.
There was like 4 attachments on there. It's all right.
Gotcha.
We were a little
Okay,
busy
sorry.
yesterday. It's okay. That's all right. Yeah. But yeah, all those financials obviously for the council in your email, and like I said, on the city website also. So
Sorry about that.
it's all right. But that's all I had. Unless, like I said, anyone else has any questions?
The obviously we're with this budget process and kind of where we're at, and bringing all the department heads in and continue to look at this data in the budget. It's also, in some ways, helps for me as kind of like a live, for the year look at each of the departments, kind of where they're at, where their year-to-date actuals are. I know we're going to be talking with department heads shortly. I'm wondering if we can kind of get more of a monthly as we finish the year too. Kind of by department, monitoring of kind of where we are. It seems to me, obviously, we've been we're in mostly good shape on the kind of the areas for the budget. I think the fire department's overtime, that's the one area I'm a little concerned about, based on budgeted versus actuals for FY25, and if that cost center will remain under its allocated line for this year. The other budgeted areas don't seem to be going towards that, overdoing the budget. But so there's a process for that. Tammy, I know you've done this in your past, but I'm probably going to dial into a little bit now. Just what are the areas that could potentially go over by FY25, and where we might need to do a budget reallocation between cost centers. Which I believe would be obviously a council-approved piece in the May or the June timeframe. Is it June you usually would do that, Tammy, or July? June, the typical council meeting for something like that? I guess it depends on if it's going to...
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the last part of it.
For a budget reallocation, if there's a cost center that
Oh, you mean the
encumbrances, and let's say there's a cost center like the fire department's budgeted, right now their overtimes are well exceeding year-to-date actuals, and I'm just concerned as we get closer towards the end of the fiscal year, if they're going to go over that's not allowed for the budget, we'd have to do a reallocation from cost centers that are under, I believe.
Right.
So
Yeah, you can do it probably in anywhere between July and September, because you kind of want to get all your AP in and stuff so that you can actually really get a better idea.
So you're saying if that cost center goes over in fiscal year 25, we can still reallocate in 26 for 25? So you can allow kind of the overage without having to go to council. I don't have to reallocate within the fiscal year. Okay, that's good to know. So that's a kind of a fiscal year closeout for 26. Now that we can encumber, we have a better idea of the budget. We reallocate based on that, and then encumber whatever, and then everything else goes to undesignated fund balance. So
I am looking forward to seeing the 24 audit so that we could, because that's another piece that's missing from the budget this year is we don't have what encumbrances. So I mean, there could be savings in that budget if we had the 24 audit.
Cool.
Yeah, understood completely. Yep.
great.
Okay. I can't, is there anyone in the audience?
Just going to say, you can't see
Yeah,
Tammy,
no.
but there are people in the audience.
Would anyone like to speak
Please. There's two people, Tammy, that are here.
Okay.
First one's on his way.
Morning.
Good morning.
I've got your
Jared
timer, Tammy.
Wilbur.
Is there a bald spot in the back of his head?
I don't think that's how this works, but yes.
Steve, we might have to report you for that one.
Last week, we spoke briefly about impact fees across town. And at the end of the meeting, Charlie brought up the fact that that would be possibly talked about coming up with ordinances or something. And I didn't know if you could elaborate a little more of what your thought process was on how you'd be addressing that and what you'd be thinking moving forward.
I don't know yet. It's kind of the ordinance review. Yeah, I could consider that. Also just process in general. Sure, there's the ordinances that are,
Or maybe you said process.
we've talked about, so I think it's a little more of a broad, just, I think Steve and I have talked about, just that business-friendly aspect, how you get people that want to do business here, how it goes forward as quickly as possible. So, and not discourage investment based on those pieces. So we got a lot of growth here, we got a lot of businesses coming, there's already good signs that business, but we can do better. I've heard from a lot of developers that that Ellsworth is not business friendly. A lot of it aligns along kind of the way that they feel that they've come through our processes. I know, Steve, you've heard a little bit about our fees. I haven't heard it. That doesn't mean that it's not the driving force, but the driving force I've heard from a lot of us is how they come through our planning board is inhibiting their amenability towards the process. I get a lot of pieces on that. I also have gotten pieces from parking lot sizes, heights of building limitations up on High Street area. I have a whole list whenever I talk to somebody that says, hey, we have this, ordinance that we don't like as much, just kind of, hey, this is something we should consider. It's been a while since those ordinances were reviewed. I know, Nancy, with a lot of your smart growth pieces as well, we saw a line of sight issue with that had the potential to forestall a $14 million residential development that's now back online and moving forward. So, but to your point, Jared, too, on the impact fees as well, on how that might, I'd put that on the list as well of things we need to analyze. So,
If I could speak to that for just a moment. If I had my way, they'd be gone at 8:15 today.
I just feel like if they were eliminated, the city itself would make more on the long dollar than the quick dollar up front. And I feel like, we got rid of or looked into those more. I feel like the business end of town would really start blooming again, and that would bring jobs, and that would also bring big dollar for the taxes, which would offset the cost of Mr. and Mrs. Ellsworth when they get their taxes. I mean, we can mess with the appraisals of houses, and you can mess with the mill rate, but at the end of the day, if people start seeing less that they actually have to pay, I think that would,
and I hate to, we're at 3, I know I used up some of that time, but I'd also like just maybe to bring in Tammy. I don't know if you have any background, Tammy, on, did you do any work with, oops, she just left.
Well,
How are you?
so I can fill the void for a minute. Just so you're aware, there's legislation coming forward at the state level to address impact fees. The bills aren't printed yet, or one is, but the others aren't. So there are things to look at that level. And as we move forward, I wonder if, Nate, can you mute her?
Thank you. You can just have him email it right to me.
Okay.
You all set to on that?
Didn't want her to be saying anything that shouldn't go out to
Are you good
the.
to go?
We're good.
I'm sorry, were you talking to me?
No,
I had to
we'll-
go do some work.
we were just gonna say you might want to mute departure, but we're good now. Nancy was talking about impact fees in the state.
So I can update you on what the bills are. We're tracking a couple of them. And the direction we're going about, let's make it easier to move through the process, I'm all for. As we're looking at it, I think the intention is if you do with fees up front, long-term it comes forward. But if there's some way to ensure that those initial costs are covered if it doesn't go that way. So there's lots of ways we can look at this to meet both the needs of the businesses coming in and all the single people who live in Ellsworth who also pay taxes in addition to Mr. and Mrs. Ellsworth. So I think there's ways to definitely take a look at it and see what we can do to find a better balance.
Tammy, I just didn't know if you had any historical knowledge on kind of impact fees in Ellsworth and the development of those.
I believe that we put them in place it was back in 2008-ish timeframe, and we were planning on a huge growth from, they were looking at all these different stores, like 100 different stores coming into that area, and that's kind of why we put it in place. And then in 2008, when the economy kind of crashed, nobody moved in, and so that's all I have for that. Michelle would probably be a better resource for that.
Yeah, I'll look into it. I know there's a piece in the city makes an investment in some of the infrastructure to spur economic growth that you want to recoup some investment. And, even though that area hasn't gotten the hundreds of stores, we did the calculations on, it's about 13 million additional tax revenue that's flowed through in those areas in that time frame, more than paid for that road, 3-4 times over. That being said, I'm kind of into Steve's opinion too. I'm more in the credit enhancement agreements to spur people to invest in critical areas that aren't, that are kind of currently underutilized, as opposed to impact fees, and that, but there's a TIF conversation too, which could talk about that other side of the coin, which isn't just the fees we charge to developers, but how do we, I know directionally in Ellsworth that hasn't, typically we have pursued credit enhancement agreements with private investment, that they, when that we've pursued our TIFs, they don't typically, that the tax shelter of that growth, stays in the city's realm. I know there's a couple caveats to that when it comes to the senior housing development, I think, and so there could be categories though that especially in areas like the Myrick Street area, or if you're doing residential housing for the city in our urban core, or maybe some places on Water Street. But again, those are just general thoughts. And, when we move forward on ordinance review, and if we move forward, I think in April, we'll talk about that more, and our TIF district credit enhancement agreement reimaginings, how those things kind of layer together. That's super important. I think those are, in many ways, kind of the three prongs here is, a capital improvement plan that really has much more detailed data on the full extent of the depreciating assets and our road and infrastructure kind of costs that we're going to need to address to spur additional economic and, community livability, obviously, with the roads and infrastructure pieces. But then also, how do we change our ordinances and processes so we're promoting business development as much as possible? And then, our tax structure and our tax incremental financing and potential credit enhancement agreements so that we can be a very pro-business, pro-growth entity here in Ellsworth to help get that new tax dollars in so that it can help offset some of the current taxpayers that are here aren't carrying as much of the share of increase in size of government, et cetera.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Roger?
Roger Gilly, resident of City of Ellsworth. As I've been watching these budget meetings, I've seen some wants, not needs. My concern is if we go forth and for one, the highway department, I listened last night we kept on saying, well, we're adding more to the highway department. They have a hard time keeping up with what they have now. I'm afraid that if we start, buying paving machines and rollers and everything that goes with it, the cost, to the taxpayers is gonna increase a lot, and then we're gonna still have to hire somebody to go do the job because our highway crew doesn't have the time, and we don't have the expertise in the fields of paving. I heard one person, hasn't experience with paving, takes more than one to run a paver. And the other point is, you know, I got neighbors down the road from me, they can see the water from their attic. You know, they pay $6,000 a year for taxes, because you can see the water from their attic. At what point, do we end up like Bar Harbor and, you know, Mr. and Mr. Ellsworth have to move out of Ellsworth because they can't afford it? I feel we're well on that way now. You know, they said taxes this year or whatever, 500 to 1,000, depending on the house. I really feel that the city needs to step back a little bit, you know, maybe take the burden off the taxpayer and sell all the properties that the city has gained. As we know in past, the city's been sued for selling houses that they couldn't. The city had to pay money to an ex-homeowner, and the person that bought the property had to pay some more money on top of what he already won the house for. We can't keep doing that, you know. I feel the city, you know, as they get this tax money and then they just use it how they want, whether they need to or not. It seems to be a problem. And I don't see it getting any better. We talked about a roll-off truck. My question is, all right, so we pay Casella. They're a big company, they charge a lot of money. What about the guy that's right across the road from the transfer station? He's got roll-off trucks. He's a small local business. He does other towns. What about if we bought our own dumpsters and see about him using his truck to haul our dumpsters, if need to be? I find more money in the curbside pickup to be made than off a roll-off. You know, we talk about the dump not making money. We had an attendant up there that was allowing dump trucks to come in and dump demo debris. They would pay cash. The people would dump their truck. The city never see the money. That guy was doing pretty well. You know, and that's the only way to explain a few years ago when we had all this demo debris and no income to show for what we were paying to get rid of it. It explains what was happening. But I really think that we really need to think about, you know.
We're at 3 minutes.
All right, perfect.
And thank you for the comments. We, on the transfer station, I'm not quite sure about this point on the claims you're making on under the table money coming in or whatnot, but, you know, report to me if there's anything specific there. Obviously, if there's any something nefarious you think's happening, please send me an email with specificity and who said what, and so I can have it investigated. I wouldn't allow one bit of that in this area. I've never heard of that.
We haven't accepted demo debris for quite some time.
Right, this was previous.
So
All
since,
right, this is previous. All right, so it's not recent. This is not.
Right, but that's where we're, you know,
Yeah,
things that happen.
Yeah.
Point taken on that, I think it's a $400,000 net negative to the city of Ellsworth, so meaning the amount of dollar stickers, the prices we charge up there with Casella, with all these other pieces, you know, we take a pretty big substantial loss. I think we talked a lot about, that's funded essentially by the rest of the taxpayers here. I think we talked a bit about, on a couple last finance meetings, on some potential options to move forward. I don't think, there were some, and then Steve had some good points in the truck on getting into the business, but not having the operating costs kind of figured out. I'm not there yet. I want to solve this. I feel like this is a big cost overrun for the city. It's, you know, every single year we don't have better pricing there. It carries for us. You know, I hate to say it, I don't have the clarity of path on how we do that. I don't necessarily want to get into the business. There's not a lot of organizations that do this around here. So, you know, Mike had a presentation on some additional options there. You know, the Solid Waste Committee, I think, will continue to do that. And same thing goes for the land that we owned. I was very surprised too. I was looking in the GIS maps on another issue, and I was like, that's a ton of property the city of Ellsworth has around
Yeah,
here.
there's a huge potential there that we can move forward.
And I found this like massive book from 2019. Like a lot of things, I find great binders from 2019, and then they all become not so great between 2020 and 2024. So we have one of our employees has a SMART goal with a dedicated timeline for getting that inventory of all those properties and what are tax acquired and we may have to send out and then give back to, any proceeds would go back to the property owner per the law, but also, Steve, to your point previously, like I think that's morally right as well. And then what are owned outright from the city that may not have the purpose? I know there's a few properties that were thought of for I think a public safety area that, with the police station where it's at, and I don't believe the fire department's considering them. It should be considered by the council, just, hey, we bought this property, we took it off the tax rolls a decade ago, this is how much it's worth. Let's get it back on the tax rolls. If there's proceeds for it, great. And then even for a lot of the tax acquired properties, it might not be a big moneymaker for the city on sales, but at least they're back on the tax rolls and potentially being bought by private developers. I think I had a Q2 end for that. When it's on the May meeting, we're gonna have a discussion per Councilor Halloran's requests. So hopefully we'll get a little more clarity on those pieces. And I hope it's a substantial amount, but also getting those back on the tax rolls can help future councils and future city managers have more additional property actually, generating revenue as opposed to just being owned by government.
Well, and they also draw down the values of the properties around them. So everybody benefits if they go back on the tax rolls, they're back into productive use. It's not just that parcel, it's also the ones around them that benefit. So, yeah, I think that's a great, I
Interesting.
like the timeline. It's,
And just
get it under control.
speak a little further on that, there's likely no direct debt other than what we would owe the person that owned the property if it's tax acquired. There's no direct debt on that, and that's clean money to put towards the maintenance of these buildings, and other things that are just
I like that
just
idea.
eroding. And it's kind of like, in my little world, I look at the whole picture and I'm like, okay, so you've got this much stuff that's in mediocre condition, or do we have this much stuff in good repaired condition?
Yeah, and clear the decks. Definitely to your point, Stephen, I think, and I'm not, what's the word I'm looking for? I am not exempt from this as well. As a lot of times council, city managers, I think it's like the new, we need to do this. I mean, that's where the political credit comes in because you see it more. And it's not a lot of fun to say, hey, we have these clay pipes under the ground that you don't even know about. And they're costing us a ton of money. And we need to spend a ton of time of our public works to dig them out, or we need to spend a ton of money because over the long run, it really costs a lot of money. It's going to be more if we fix it, and blah, blah, blah. Like we're not going to do that project for millions of bucks. And people will be like, oh, life is so much better around here. I've been thinking about that clay pipe underneath the ground every day, so.
Well, we need a ribbon cutting for the clay pipes.
Ribbon cutting.
replacement. I think that's the key.
But they keep accumulating when you're not, and that's where I think that the capital improvement plan too, with a lot more data on those pieces. And I like that idea, Steve, for that project with the land, if there is, that it should go maybe towards deferred maintenance on other pieces. And there's stuff too, I think the land of, like Pump House Point, what do we want to do with that? It's just depreciating over there. The water department left 4 or 5 years ago. It ain't getting any better. And if we want to sell it, it's a historical thing for the city, the water department sign and the pieces, or do we want to make it a recreational asset so people can take canoe launches over there? But not doing anything about it is just costing the city longer over the
I think
long
that's a
run.
great opportunity for a project with public input and really get what are the ideas that come from the community, what do the people of Ellsworth want to see, and then what are the costs and the implications for all of it. But it's unique. I put in a my kayak there a couple of times. It's a beautiful spot.
Yeah.
And a cool building that should be not just sitting empty. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we got 5,000 a year and just kind of heating it. It's kind of a workshop right now, but probably not highest value for the taxpayer in the city as a workshop.
Cool.
Great. Anything else? Thank you all.
Thank you.
No,